Welcome back to our channel. Many English learners spend hours watching videos and listening to English, but they ignore one of the most powerful tools for improving fluency: reading. Reading is not just about learning new words. It helps you improve your vocabulary, grammar, speaking, writing, and even your ability to think in English. The more you read, the more familiar English becomes. Words become easier to remember, sentences become easier to create, and speaking becomes more natural. In today's video, you will discover why reading is one of the fastest ways to improve your English, and how a simple daily reading habit can completely transform your fluency. So stay with me until the end, because this lesson could change the way you learn English forever. Now let's begin. Lesson 1. Reading builds your English foundation. If you want to become fluent in English, there is one habit that can completely transform your learning journey: reading. Many learners focus only on speaking and listening. They watch videos, they listen to podcasts, they practice conversations. These activities are important, but many people overlook the power of reading. That is a mistake, because reading is one of the strongest foundations you can build for your English. Think about building a house. A beautiful house needs a strong foundation. Without a solid foundation, everything becomes unstable. English works the same way. Vocabulary, grammar, speaking, writing, and confidence all become stronger when your reading habit becomes stronger. This is why reading is so important. Every time you read, you are exposing your brain to English. You see words, you see sentence structures, you see grammar patterns, you see how ideas are expressed. And the more often you see these things, the more familiar they become. Imagine reading English for just a few minutes every day. At first, progress may seem slow. You may need a dictionary. You may not understand everything. You may feel frustrated. That is normal. Every learner experiences this stage. But something important is happening. Your brain is becoming more comfortable with English. Every page teaches your brain something new. Every paragraph increases your exposure to the language. Over time, this exposure creates powerful results. One reason reading is so effective is because it allows you to learn naturally. Many learners try to memorize everything. They memorize word lists, grammar rules, definitions. But memorization alone is often difficult. Reading gives your brain context. Instead of seeing isolated words, you see words being used in real sentences. This makes learning easier and more meaningful. Think about how children learn language. Children do not begin by studying dictionaries. They learn through exposure. They hear words repeatedly. They see words repeatedly. Gradually, understanding develops. Reading creates a similar experience for English learners. The more exposure you get, the stronger your understanding becomes. Another important benefit of reading is that it increases your contact with English. Many learners only interact with English during study sessions. Perhaps 30 minutes a day. Perhaps one lesson a day. Then English disappears from their lives. Reading changes that. Reading allows English to become part of your daily routine. Even 10 or 15 minutes of reading every day creates extra exposure. And extra exposure creates improvement. Now let's talk about confidence. Many learners lack confidence because English feels unfamiliar. Words look unfamiliar. Sentences look unfamiliar. Expressions look unfamiliar. This unfamiliarity creates uncertainty. Reading solves this problem. The more often you see English, the more familiar it becomes. and familiar things are less intimidating. Imagine meeting a stranger. At first, the person feels unfamiliar, but after seeing them many times, you become comfortable around them. English works in a similar way. The more often you encounter English, the more comfortable it feels. Comfort creates confidence. Confidence improves learning. Another powerful reason to read is that reading trains your brain to recognize patterns. Language is full of patterns. Certain words appear together. Certain sentence structures appear repeatedly. Certain expressions occur in many situations. When you read regularly, your brain starts noticing these patterns automatically. You do not have to memorize every rule. Your brain begins recognizing how English works. This process happens naturally through exposure. Many fluent speakers developed much of their language ability through reading. Not because reading alone creates fluency, but because reading strengthens the foundation that supports fluency. Think about athletes. Athletes spend time building strength before competing. They develop the foundation first. Reading plays a similar role in language learning. It strengthens the foundation that supports speaking, listening, writing, and comprehension. Another important truth is that reading teaches you how English is actually used. Textbooks often teach rules. Reading shows real language. You see how ideas are connected, how stories are told, how opinions are expressed, how questions are asked. This practical exposure is incredibly valuable. The more examples your brain sees, the easier it becomes to use English yourself. Now imagine two learners. The first learner studies grammar and vocabulary but rarely reads. The second learner studies grammar and vocabulary while also reading every day. After several months, who is likely to have a stronger understanding of English? Usually the second learner. Because reading provides constant reinforcement. Words appear repeatedly. Grammar appears repeatedly. Sentence patterns appear repeatedly. Everything becomes stronger through repetition. This is one reason reading is often called a language multiplier. It improves many skills at the same time. You learn vocabulary. You strengthen grammar. You improve comprehension. You increase confidence. And you deepen your connection with the language. Remember, reading is not just an activity. It is an investment in your future fluency. Every page teaches something. Every paragraph strengthens your understanding. Every reading session helps build a stronger foundation. So do not underestimate the power of reading. Make it part of your daily life. Start with simple materials. Read consistently. Be patient with yourself and trust the process, because every great English learner needs a strong foundation. And one of the best ways to build that foundation is through reading. The more you read, the stronger your English becomes. And the stronger your foundation becomes, the easier every other part of English learning will be. Lesson 2. Learn vocabulary naturally through reading. One of the biggest challenges for English learners is vocabulary. Many people spend hours memorizing word lists. They write words in notebooks. They create flashcards. They repeat definitions again and again. Yet after a few days, many of those words are forgotten. This can be frustrating. You work hard to learn new vocabulary, but it does not always stay in your memory. The reason is simple. Words are easier to remember when they are connected to meaning and context. And that is exactly what reading provides. Reading is one of the most natural ways to build vocabulary because it shows words being used in real situations. Instead of learning a word by itself, you see how it fits into a sentence. You understand how it is used. You understand when it is used. And because of this, the word becomes easier to remember. Imagine you learn the word confident. You could memorize the definition. Or you could read a sentence like, "She felt confident before her presentation." Now the word has meaning. You can picture the situation. Your brain creates a connection. That connection helps the word stay in your memory longer. This is why reading is so powerful. It teaches vocabulary naturally. Another important benefit is repetition. Many useful English words appear again and again. When you read regularly, you start seeing the same words repeatedly. At first, a word may seem unfamiliar. The second time, it feels a little more familiar. After seeing it many times, you begin understanding it automatically. This process happens naturally without forcing yourself to memorize long vocabulary lists. Think about how children learn language. Children do not sit down and study dictionaries. They hear words repeatedly in meaningful situations. Gradually, those words become part of their vocabulary. Reading creates a similar experience for English learners. The more exposure you get, the larger your vocabulary becomes. Another reason reading is effective is that it teaches useful vocabulary. Many learners spend time memorizing words they rarely use. As a result, they quickly forget them. Reading introduces words that appear naturally in communication. Words used in conversations, words used in stories, words used in everyday situations. This makes your learning more practical. And practical vocabulary is easier to use when speaking and writing. Now let's talk about something important. Reading does not only teach individual words, it also teaches phrases. This is extremely valuable. Native speakers often communicate using groups of words rather than single words. For example, at the end of the day, as soon as possible. In my opinion, these expressions appear frequently in English. When you read regularly, you encounter these phrases naturally. Over time, they become familiar, and eventually, you begin using them yourself. This makes your English sound more natural and fluent. Another advantage of reading is that it exposes you to different types of vocabulary. You may read stories, articles, biographies, conversations. Each type of reading introduces new words and expressions. The variety helps expand your language skills. The more diverse your reading material, the richer your vocabulary becomes. Many learners worry when they encounter unfamiliar words while reading. They stop. They become frustrated. They feel discouraged. But encountering unknown words is actually a good sign. It means you are learning. Every unfamiliar word is an opportunity to grow your vocabulary. You do not need to understand every word immediately. Focus on understanding the general meaning. Sometimes the sentence itself provides enough clues. Your brain often learns through exposure and repetition. This is one reason reading feels more natural than memorization. You are learning through experience, not through pressure. Another important truth is that vocabulary growth takes time. Many learners expect instant results. They want to learn hundreds of words quickly. But language learning is usually gradual. A few new words each day may not seem impressive. Yet over weeks and months, those small gains become significant. 5 words a day becomes 35 words a week. Hundreds of words over several months. Thousands of words over several years. Small daily progress creates remarkable results. Imagine 2 learners. The first learner memorizes vocabulary lists but rarely reads. The second learner reads every day and learns words through context. After several months, who is likely to remember more vocabulary? Usually the second learner, because the words are connected to real situations and meaningful examples. The learning feels natural, and natural learning tends to last longer. Another benefit of reading is confidence. The more words you recognize, the easier English becomes. You understand more. You read faster. You feel less intimidated by the language. And that confidence encourages you to keep learning. Everything begins building on itself. Vocabulary grows. Understanding grows. Confidence grows. Fluency grows. Remember, reading is not just about finishing books. It is about exposing yourself to language. It is about meeting new words. It is about seeing those words used naturally. It is about building a vocabulary that you can actually remember and use. So make reading a daily habit. Read stories, read articles, read conversations, read anything that interests you. Because every page contains opportunities to learn. Every sentence contains useful language. And every reading session helps you build a stronger, richer English vocabulary. The more you read, the more words you learn. And the more words you learn, the easier every part of English becomes. Lesson 3. Improve your grammar without memorizing rules. One of the biggest fears English learners have is grammar. Many people believe they must memorize hundreds of grammar rules before they can speak or write well. Because of this belief, they spend countless hours studying grammar books. They learn rules. They learn formulas. They complete exercises. Yet when it is time to speak, they still feel unsure. Why? Because knowing grammar rules and using grammar naturally are not always the same thing. This is where reading becomes incredibly powerful. Reading helps you improve your grammar without constantly memorizing rules. Instead of learning grammar as isolated information, you learn it through real English. You see how sentences are actually written. You see how words work together. You see grammar in action. And over time, your brain begins recognizing patterns naturally. Think about how children learn their first language. Children do not begin by studying grammar books. They do not memorize sentence structures. They hear language. They read language. They use language. Eventually, they begin creating correct sentences because their brains have seen those patterns thousands of times. Reading helps English learners develop a similar advantage. The more English you read, the more examples your brain receives. And examples are powerful teachers. Imagine reading these sentences. I went to the store yesterday. She visited her friend last week. They watched a movie last night. Without opening a grammar book, you begin noticing a pattern. These sentences talk about the past. Your brain starts recognizing how English expresses past actions. This process happens naturally through repeated exposure. That is one reason reading is such an effective grammar teacher. Another benefit is that reading helps you understand sentence structure. Many learners struggle because they know individual words, but do not know how to organize those words into natural sentences. Reading solves this problem. Every sentence you read becomes an example. You see how ideas are connected. You see where words are placed. You see how native writers express thoughts. Over time, these patterns become familiar, and familiar patterns are easier to use when speaking and writing. Think about music. A musician becomes skilled partly because they hear music repeatedly. They recognize patterns. They recognize rhythm. They recognize structure. Language works in a similar way. Reading exposes you to the rhythm and structure of English. The more often you see it, the more naturally you begin using it. Another important truth is that grammar becomes easier when it is connected to meaning. Many learners try to learn grammar rules in isolation. As a result, the rules feel confusing and difficult to remember. Reading provides context. You see grammar serving a purpose. You see how it helps communicate ideas. This makes learning more meaningful. And meaningful learning is easier to remember. Now let's talk about confidence. Many learners become afraid of grammar mistakes. They overthink every sentence. They worry about every rule. They become so focused on correctness that speaking feels stressful. Reading helps reduce this anxiety. Why? Because reading fills your mind with examples of correct English. The more examples you see, the more natural grammar becomes. Instead of constantly thinking about rules, you begin relying on familiarity. You know a sentence sounds right because you have seen similar sentences many times before. This is a powerful form of learning. Another reason reading improves grammar is repetition. Grammar patterns appear repeatedly in books, articles, stories, and conversations. The more often you encounter those patterns, the stronger they become in your memory. At first, you may not notice them, but your brain is learning. Gradually, those structures become familiar, and eventually, they become part of your own English. This is why regular reading is more effective than occasional reading. Consistency matters. A little reading every day creates continuous exposure. Continuous exposure creates stronger language skills. Imagine two learners. The first learner studies grammar rules for hours but rarely reads. The second learner studies some grammar and also reads every day. After several months, who is likely to have a better feel for natural English? Usually the second learner, because reading provides thousands of examples of grammar being used correctly. And examples often teach more effectively than rules alone. Another powerful benefit is that reading shows grammar in real communication. You see how people tell stories, how they share opinions, how they describe experiences, how they ask questions. This practical exposure teaches you how grammar functions in everyday English. That knowledge becomes incredibly useful when you speak or write. Remember, this does not mean grammar books are useless. Grammar study can be helpful. But reading gives life to grammar. It turns rules into real language. It helps you move from understanding grammar to actually using grammar. That is an important difference. The goal is not simply knowing the rules. The goal is communicating effectively, and reading helps you achieve that goal. So make reading part of your daily routine. Pay attention to sentences. Notice patterns. Notice how ideas are expressed. Do not worry about memorizing every rule. Focus on exposure. Focus on understanding. Focus on consistency, because every page you read teaches your brain how English works. Every sentence strengthens your understanding of grammar, and over time, you will discover something amazing. The grammar that once felt complicated begins feeling natural, not because you memorized hundreds of rules, but because you saw those rules come to life through reading. That is one of the greatest gifts reading can give an English learner. Lesson 4. Reading helps you think in English. One of the biggest challenges English learners face is translation. Someone asks a question in English. The learner first translates it into their native language. Then they think of an answer. Then they translate the answer back into English. Only after all of that do they speak. This process takes time. It creates hesitation. It creates confusion. And it often makes speaking feel difficult. Many learners believe they have a speaking problem. In reality, they often have a thinking problem. They are still thinking in their native language instead of thinking in English. This is where reading becomes extremely powerful. Reading helps train your brain to think directly in English. The more English you read, the more familiar English becomes. Words become familiar. Sentence structures become familiar. Expressions become familiar. Eventually, your brain begins understanding English without needing translation. That is a major step toward fluency. Think about your native language. When someone speaks to you, you do not translate every sentence. You understand immediately. The meaning appears naturally. Fluent English speakers experience something similar when using English. Their brains connect directly with the language. Reading helps build those direct connections. Imagine reading a simple sentence. No translation is necessary. This is how reading gradually changes the way you process language. Another reason reading helps is that it fills your mind with English. Every sentence you read becomes an example of how English works. Every paragraph gives your brain more exposure. The more exposure you receive, the easier it becomes to think in English naturally. Think about spending time with a friend every day. At first, you may not know much about them, but the more time you spend together, the more familiar they become. English works in a similar way. The more time you spend with the language, the more comfortable it feels. And comfort reduces the need for translation. Another important benefit is that reading teaches you common sentence patterns. Many learners struggle to think in English because they do not have enough ready-made patterns in their minds. Reading solves this problem. You repeatedly see useful structures such as, I would like to. I think that, in my opinion. As a result, over time, these patterns become familiar. Eventually, your brain begins using them automatically. Instead of building every sentence from the beginning, you start using patterns you have seen many times before. This makes thinking much faster. Now let's talk about speed. One reason conversations feel difficult is because translation slows everything down. Your brain has to complete extra work. It has to switch between languages. That process takes time. Reading helps reduce this burden. The more you read, the more direct your understanding becomes. And direct understanding creates faster thinking. Faster thinking creates smoother speaking. Another powerful effect of reading is confidence. Many learners feel nervous because English feels unfamiliar. When you see English every day, that unfamiliar feeling begins to disappear. You recognize more words. You recognize more phrases. You recognize more sentence structures. As a result, your confidence grows. And confidence plays a huge role in language learning. People often speak better when they feel comfortable. Reading helps create that comfort. Imagine two learners. The first learner studies vocabulary lists but rarely reads. The second learner reads English every day. After several months, who is more likely to think naturally in English? Usually the second learner, because reading constantly exposes the brain to real English. That exposure creates familiarity, and familiarity creates fluency. Another important truth is that you do not need difficult books to get these benefits. Simple reading material works perfectly. Stories, articles, dialogues, short books, anything you enjoy reading can help. The goal is consistent exposure, not complexity. Many learners make the mistake of choosing material that is too difficult. Then they spend more time translating than reading. This can become frustrating. Choose material that you mostly understand. This allows your brain to focus on meaning rather than constant translation. As your skills improve, you can gradually move to more advanced material. Remember, thinking in English is not a skill that appears overnight. It develops gradually, one sentence at a time, one page at a time, one book at a time. Every reading session helps strengthen your connection with the language. Every paragraph teaches your brain to process English more directly. And every day of reading brings you closer to thinking naturally in English. So if you want to speak more fluently, start by reading more. Because fluent speaking begins with fluent thinking. And reading is one of the most effective ways to train your brain to think directly in English. The more you read, the less you translate. The less you translate, the more naturally English flows through your mind. And when English flows naturally through your mind, it begins flowing naturally from your mouth as well. Lesson 5. Create a daily reading habit. Reading can transform your English, but only if you do it consistently. Many learners read for one day, skip the next few days, and then wonder why their progress is slow. The secret is not reading a lot once in a while. The secret is reading a little every day. Even 10 to 15 minutes of daily reading can make a big difference over time. You do not need to start with difficult books. In fact, simple material is often better. Read short stories, read articles, read conversations. Read anything that interests you and matches your level. When you enjoy what you read, it becomes much easier to stay consistent. Another important rule is to focus on understanding, not perfection. You do not need to know every word. You do not need to stop and check the dictionary every minute. Try to understand the main idea and keep reading. Your vocabulary and comprehension will improve naturally through regular exposure. Reading every day helps you learn new words, understand grammar patterns, think more easily in English, and speak with greater confidence. Small daily efforts create big long-term results. Remember, fluency is not built in a single week. It is built one page at a time, one chapter at a time, one day at a time. So make reading a daily habit. Stay consistent. Trust the process. And let English become a natural part of your life. Because the more you read, the stronger your English will become. Remember, every great English speaker was once a beginner. One of the simplest ways to improve your English is to read every day. The more you read, the more words you learn, the more grammar you understand, and the more confident you become. Start small, stay consistent, and trust the process. A few pages a day can create a huge difference over time. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.